So welcome to the podcast, James.
Thank you, Jack. It's
How
been
you
a
doing?
while. I'm doing really well, apart from my arm. But
Yeah, you were telling me about that. You tried to fight a younger man on the rugby pitch.
there's no fighting. I'm too old for fighting. I'm too old for playing rugby. I tried to tackle a larger, younger, bigger person, ran out of talent, and detached my bicep tendon. And actually, when I had an operation on it, and the surgeon came in and he said, he looked at his notes and he hadn't really acknowledged, he hadn't looked at me in the eye yet. So he looks at his notes and he's going, yeah, detached distal bicep tendon rupture, rugby, yeah, all fine. And he goes, hang on a minute. Says he your date of birth 1974. That can't be true. And I looked up and took one look at my battered, balding pate and said, you're way too old to be playing rugby. So it's my fault. But other than that, I'm on fine form. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm not too bad at all. We should probably just quickly mention how we know each other, which is through the Great British Year, which I'm not sure if anyone might remember it now, but it's 2013. It was a wildlife series that you were producer. Were you head producer or?
Yeah, I was series producer.
Series producer. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, it was one of those series that execs at the BBC sell, saying it'll be just like Frozen Planet. It'll be exactly like Frozen Planet, but in Britain. And someone buys it, someone at the BBC in their naivety says, yeah, you can make that. That's a great idea. And they didn't tell them it's a tenth of the budget of Frozen Planet. And that's where I met you, because you were, I can't remember where I came across you, but we were looking to film. How did I contact you? Because we were looking to film fish. And
yeah.
I can't remember how I found you.
So the way it was all by chance, really. It was just a tweet. You put a tweet out and it was something like, we're looking for camera ops with ideas and whatnot.
Free labor.
Yeah, well, yeah, more not far off. And I just got in touch because that was my very first BBC. You were my foot in the door with the BBC, really. And I got in touch, and after pitching bits and bobs, we went with Chub eating blackberries, didn't we?
I know, it was such a memorable day. It was beautiful weather, and I seem to remember a Spitfire being involved, flying over the top of us. Do you remember that?
Oh, I didn't until you mentioned it, but I do vaguely remember something like that. Because I was absolutely bricking it on that day, because obviously I was 21, fresh out of uni, and I was thinking, oh, don't fuck this up, So I think the only thing, it was basically carrying bags, and I touched a GoPro at one point, was about the extent of it, but I still thought, don't want to fuck anything up. And it was, I think you were sketching by the river. I don't know if you remember this. You were sketching just a little thing in your little notebook, and I can't remember who the camera op was, but you had a cameraman with you as well. And it was quite serene, and there were goldfinches, and it was just really lovely. And then all of a sudden there was a and I don't know if it was you or the camera, but one of you had this rip-roaring fart, really cracking fart. And
you can't invite me on a podcast and accuse me of flatulence. And well, I can guarantee it definitely wasn't me, Jack.
Okay. Well, I'm not accusing you. I'm just putting you up there with the suspects. But I just thought that it cut the tension beautifully. Anyway, that's the point. I'm praising you for your flatulence because it made me feel so much more at ease, because I was like, oh, okay, they are human. That's great. So we'll start.
So we've got farting and rugby in, so that's good.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about wildlife at some point, but
yeah, no, it was a memorable day, and you're so passionate about your freshwater fish. And the more, in lockdown, I've been, like so many people, taking to rivers and got into wild swimming. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and actually, everyone suddenly noticed that the rivers aren't in a great state in the UK, and I think it's been. That if there's a tiny cloud to the if there's a silver lining to the cloud that is COVID, it will be that people have gone, hang on a minute, our rivers aren't supposed to be like this, actually. Yeah, so
no, definitely they're in a horrible. And we've had people on the show before talking about Fergal, Sharky, and a few others who've really gone down that rabbit hole. But we're mentioning the Great British Year. So was that the first UK series that you'd worked on? And if it wasn't. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. No, the very first thing I did was called Watch Out, which no one that is listening to this will probably, I'll be very surprised if they saw it. It was even lower budget than the Great British Year. It was it was very cheap. It was only about 15 minutes long. It was on a slot on BBC Two that hardly anyone watched. It had all these avant-garde ideas. And because it had low viewing figures, low budget, it was low it was low risk. There wasn't a lot riding on it, so a lot of real maverick young producers worked on it, and I got my first gig on it. And the series producer was a legend, and he was very creative, quite keen to offload all the hard work and heavy lifting onto young producers and directors. and I got my chance to work with some of the industry greats like Graham Booth and Mark Brownlow and people like that. And Simon King was a presenter on it, met him. And it was British wildlife, but some of the stuff was actually quite weird. I remember Graham Booth did a scene about bloody nose beetles.
Yeah.
And the Tarantino film had just come out, his first big smash. What was it called? Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
And do you remember the poster was like those guys in black, and there was lots of blood spurting everywhere. So he filmed these bloody nose beetles walking. He got a pot of bloody nose beetles. He filmed them walking on white paper, cut to Tarantino-esque music with blood spattering everywhere. And that was the scene. That was it. And
it sounds brilliant.
It was really creative and kind of cool and a bit kooky. So yeah, so it was a very different beast from the Great British Year, but it was good fun and some lovely, very creative opportunities on that show.
Well, I guess it's good to get those juices flowing, and experiment, and some things will hit and some things won't, I guess, but it's good to at least try it out.
Yeah, exactly. And if they didn't work, no one was watching it anyway. So it's fine. Like so many things I've done.
Wow, I don't know about that. You've done some fantastic programs over the years. So, how are they different to the blue chip stuff you've done then? So like with the Great British Year and that sort of stuff, apart from budget, obviously, is there a different process behind it?
Yeah, it's a completely different process actually. And I suppose I would be unusual in our industry in that I've worked on more documentary presenter-led style shows, which in the industry you'll hear phrases like kick bollocks scramble or down and dirty TV, which is doing it a bit of a disservice because it's sort of it's tough. They're tough shows to make. You've got to get them quickly. They're generally lower budget. And then you've got blue chip programs, which is an industry term for basically stuff that's wildlife sequences that stand alone. And the mentality, if you work with people like Planet Earth 2, the producers on that, people like Chad and Hunter and Freddie DeVass, their skill and the DOPs they work with, what they're trying to do is remove any excuse for that shot being as close to cinematic perfection with the animal doing what it says in the script. And that I'm going to rather flippantly say that's all there is to it. Like, that's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's then a million things that can screw that shot up. Wrong lens, wrong camera, wrong place, wrong time, wrong weather, wrong angle, wrong temperature, and then all the gazillion things that an animal can do that will. As we know, if you let wildlife know what you're up to, it'll take every opportunity to bugger it up for you.
Yeah.
So that's blue chip in a nutshell, is cinematic perfection. So it's not giving up easy. It's pursuit. It failed. Go back to the drawing board, tweak the plan. It's in rugby terminology, it's being the All Blacks. It's just not giving up until you get the perfect shot. And that can happen easy if you've done your research, you're working with good scientists, the people to help you, you've got the right DOPs. It'll happen easily. Sometimes it happens easily, sometimes it never happens. But usually it's somewhere in between. And as a producer, director, you're problem solving. The other side of the other kind of productions I work on, I find more rewarding in some ways, actually, is working with presenters or hosts, if you're American, or documentary stuff, which is it's less about the perfection of shot and more about the emotional value of what's going on.
So this is like Deadly 60 and things like that you've done.
Yeah, Deadly 60. I'm doing a couple of shows now, one which is theoretically top secret, although I don't know, I'm sure if you asked anyone in Bristol, they'd know, but I'm not really supposed to go talking about it on a podcast. But,
okay.
but it'll be coming out soon-ish. But those kind of shows where you're trying to work with presenters people, public contributors, that's about capturing moments and being in the right place to see that happening. And it's a completely different skill set. You often have to compromise photography quite a lot, actually. And often it's more driven by sound. But yeah, it's about an emotional intelligence, which is why I think some people find it harder to switch. Some people can do both. Others are totally unsuited to, they're suited to one, but not the other. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see that and think I'd never really thought about that before. But yeah, when I think back to some of the other producers, I know they tend to be one or the other really. And I guess that makes it an interesting career choice. And I wondered, what is the career path if someone wants to be a wildlife TV producer? So I was actually going to talk about your own experiences, but what's got you to where you are today then, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, a hell of a lot of luck, obviously. I'm genuinely not that talented, but I'm quite good at getting on with people. I'm quite good at looking for opportunities. I'm quite personable. I think I'm pretty good under pressure. All those things come into play. I mean, when I was at the Natural History Unit, I asked a load of my colleagues what their stories were. How did you get in? And I sort of compiled them. And everyone had a different story. There wasn't a classic route. It's not like production companies generally advertise for a job. And not because that's not a good idea. It's just that if you said, do you want a job working with David Attenborough on a show about sharks? Can you imagine how many applications you get? And then some poor devil's got to go through them all. And, programs don't have the infrastructure to do that. So, and that's worth knowing, actually, that it's not like a production company doesn't operate. The business model of a wildlife series is the program. So you've budgeted, pardon that, the woofing's my dog in the background.
That's okay.
If your business model is making something like Planet Earth 2 or The Great British Year or Deadly 60, and you need a researcher, your budget doesn't cover a 3-month talent drive to find the latest researchers. You tend to go with people who are around the industry already. And that's good because it favors people who can get their foot in the door. But it's bad in the sense that it's been dreadful for diversity. It really has been dreadful for diversity because you end up with more people alike for people who've come before because they were in the same area doing the same thing, went to the right universities, whatever. But my career path was, I'm a failed vet. So I sort of played with veterinary science, did really well at GCSE, screwed up my A-levels, semi-screwed up, did enough to go and read zoology, which I loved, fell on my feet at Cardiff University, which I loved, had fun, played rugby, wrote to the BBC. I couldn't believe there were people that got paid to make wildlife films. And I hadn't realized that when I was interested in veterinary science. And a very nice man called Paul Appleby said, well, come and, I think I wrote 18 letters and I got a reply to the 18th. And he said, come and have a chat. And he gave me a job on Watch Out. And my sort of modus operandi was to, every time anyone asked me to do anything, was to just go, yeah. And then not come back to them with loads of high maintenance questions, no complaining, no like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I just would go away and ask other people. I'd go and bug the hell out of other people. And of course, the job would get done. And all the boss knew was I'd done it. And they wouldn't know that I'd had to go and ask 16 people how to access, the BBC's archive system and how to ask permission to film on a farmer's land. Or I'd rung Simon King and and he'd been scratching his head going, well, we could do this, this and this. So all they knew was that I got the job done and I took the problem away from them. And I think that's a pretty good sort of life lesson. But I was very lucky. And I suppose that's it. And I didn't know anything about telly. I mean, everyone coming into the industry now mostly does. I didn't. I was a zoologist. I still am. I'd still classify myself as a zoologist, even though I don't get paid for it. And that was my passion. I think it helps if you're passionate about something. If you really love something, you're prepared to put up with quite a lot of nonsense to get there. And I think you have to be prepared for that in any walk of life. there were lots of people that worked at the BBC while I was there that just couldn't hack all the nonsense, and there's just a lot, nothing bad, and we're not talking Me Too stuff.
Okay, because I don't want to be announcing any of this just yet, James.
No. Literally, I've never seen anything like that.
No,
it's not that interesting, the natural history unit. But you know, it's a big unwieldy organisation that's frustrating, like I imagine the NHS and the MOD and the places are. So you have to put up with a bit of that. Resilience is important.
No, definitely. Really. I think that's true of any kind of these wildlifey careers, isn't it? Like you say, there's not really a straight path that you follow, whether it's being a camera op or a presenter or producer, researcher, whatever. There's kind of ways you can do it, but no two people are going to have the exact same route, are they? I guess it's just playing to your strengths and being persistent, like you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And my if I had a special talent, it's meeting random people. I'm particularly adept at it, and I'll talk to anyone and just follow it where it leads me, and that has led to some of the most exciting experiences, coolest people, interesting opportunities, and it's almost, I don't know if you've ever read Douglas Adams' books. He always talks about Zen navigation. Follow someone that looks like where they know where they're going. You never know where you're going to lead. It's a bit like that. So that's never a bad thing. Have a plan, fine, but also be prepared to go and explore somewhere where you won't, you know, tomorrow you don't know what opportunity tomorrow will throw you, and if it does, you know, follow it and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's good advice, and certainly gives you something to think about when you're trying to do it. Two things that you're known for really are the diving side of things and snakes, and we'll cover both of those shortly. But I wanted to talk about the underwater world first. It was head of the dive unit at the NHU, is that right?
Yes, for a bit.
Yeah. So what challenges, a simple question, what challenges does underwater filmmaking present? Because obviously it's a whole different kettle of fish, if you excuse the pun, to land photography.
Very good. Well, you'll know that for every issue on land, there are more issues underwater. I'd say it's more complicated. There's certainly more issues, environmental issues. So above the ground, above the sea, you're talking about wind, rain, temperature, perhaps, or maybe not really in the UK. Unpredictability of weather in the UK is the biggest. You know, it's not like we get awful weather, but we just don't know what it's going to throw us. That's about it. In the sea, add to that currents, which are a huge problem. Swell, which is, if you imagine, if currents are akin to wind speed and direction, swell would be akin to that changing, buffeting of the wind, which if you're holding a camera is a nightmare, because it'll pick you up, and you could be anchoring against the current coming to the right, and then suddenly it's picked you up from the left and smashed you into a rock, or a sea urchin bed, in my case, was one of the last underwater shoots I did. You've got temperature's much more of an issue underwater because of the physics of water. You can die of hypothermia in any water that's even half a degree cooler than body temperature. So water, I mean, if you're in it long enough, water that feels warm, that you would swim in the tropics, you know, if you're lucky enough to go to the Red Sea or Maldives or even the Mediterranean, you jump in, you think the water's warm, 24 hours in there and you'd start getting, even that, you would get hypothermic. So there's temperature's a problem. And you can't whiz around with a camera quickly. Everything has to be waterproofed. Getting there, you know, you can't just, we always used to have a rule of thumb that everything you're filming underwater costs 2, 3, 4 times as much and takes 2, 3, 4 times as much time. And
well, I guess you've got limited time as well. Like a cameraman could sit in a hide all day and wait for you know, the bird to do whatever, but an underwater camera up can't spend all day underwater, can they? They're only going to be able to spend a limited time there.
Quite, which is why so many of us, you know, rebreathers are such a big thing these days. I mean, they were weirdly invented before the Scuba regulator, but they're more dangerous. They're definitely more dangerous. They have the potential to cause harm. it's a bit like I'm trained on scuba and on a rebreather, but if I hadn't been scuba diving for 3 years, I'd comfortably throw a scuba cylinder on and jump in the sea in most places. If you did that with a rebreather and you hadn't used it for 3 or 4 years, well, I haven't used a rebreather for ages since I trained. If I jumped on a rebreather, I'd probably kill myself. So, there is a difference.
Is it that complicated? Is it?
Yeah, there's redundancy in a scuba. Scuba setups are so simple. It either gives you air or it doesn't give you air. If it doesn't give you air, you can see it's not going to give you air. And the other way it can break more likely is it'll just give you a free flow. Your regulator will flow and you breathe off it because you're trained to do that. So, you've got to try pretty hard to kill yourself on scuba. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's if you dive within yourself, there's no reason why you should have a problem. With a rebreather, you're breathing a single mouthful of a lungful of air, and there's clever systems that are modifying that lungful of air to add a bit more oxygen, take out CO2. But because you're breathing the same lungful of air, you won't notice, and that air tastes the same. You wouldn't notice there's a problem until you pass out. Or you get oxygen toxicity, or you get CO2 poisoning, or whatever. But you wouldn't notice until you pass out. And that's the fundamental problem. So rebreathers have been made very, very safe by adding an awful lot of electronics to them that do that sensing for you. So it's quite alarming, actually, when you're at sort of 40 meters and all these alarms start going off. And, you're trained, most of your training is to work out what that alarm is, bail out to a safety gas while you're waiting, and then deal with the problem. But you can imagine, as with anything that relies on a lot of electronics and sensors, there's the potential for it to go.
No, definitely. It's not something I've not done it, and I'm a bit wary of doing it because again, you train up and you'd be fine, but like I say, scuba, you can just whop it on and off you go. So I'd stick with that, I think.
Yeah, it's
simple. For the time being. You're also a producer on Life in Cold Blood, and as you mentioned, you've got a fascination with snakes. So I wonder what interests you so much about snakes.
I don't know, really. It doesn't make sense because they don't do as much as other things. I've just always loved them. I met Miles Barton, God bless him, who died during COVID lockdown, and his memorial service wasn't so long ago. He was the series producer on Life in Cold Blood, and I met him in the BBC bar, and we just used to bore each other about reptiles. And people in the BBC Naturalist unit used to fall into generally 2 categories. You had the birders, people who like birds, and the people who liked fluffy stuff, sort of. And then everyone else was effectively an outcast. So if you liked insects, fish, or reptiles, you're some kind of weirdo, and which is probably fair enough. But so I don't know. I've always loved them, and it was a brilliant privilege to work on that show. And I think it's something physical about them. I hope no one's going to tell me there's some deep-seated psychological issues associated with that, but I've always loved them. I've kept them as pets, and
okay,
yeah.
There's something quite special about snakes, isn't it? I guess in the UK, because it's almost a treat to see a snake. It's not like some countries where you see them. If you see a snake in the UK, it's more likely going to be a grass snake. But that is something. It's something special. I would say it's something special.
It's very exotic. I mean, I've spent most of my life looking for snakes. Even when I'm not filming them, if there's a quiet moment, I'll go around lifting up rocks, lifting up dead wood, climbing trees, having a poke around, and I hardly ever find them. They're not. Usually, you see them when you're not looking for them. They're incredibly hard to find. Usually, because of they're cold-blooded. Their lifestyle usually revolves around keeping still a lot, and most of the animals are hard to spot. If an animal decides it doesn't want you to see it and it doesn't move, you've got very little chance. Fortunately, most of the animals we love do move, but on Life in Cold Blood, we had the biggest problem with filming snakes is they don't do anything, and when they do something, they give you no warning, zero warning. you would probably, I'm sure when you're looking at fish, you can tell what they're going to do by a flick of a tail or a twitch of a fin,
Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
yeah, kingfishers do things before they dive in. An elephant has tells, and the great DOPs, the great wildlife filmmakers, when they work with animals a lot, just start to learn those things. Snakes, nothing. Angry snake, cross snake, emotional state of a snake. It still looks
Poker face. They've just got a very good poker face.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, was there any standout moments for you? I mean, obviously, if you're working with all these reptiles, you love reptiles, and it's just fantastic to work on that. Was there anything you were like, this is amazing?
Yeah. I mean, filming rattlesnakes hunting for the first time for real was a big moment, and that was cool. I mean, just because no one had done it before, and we were lucky that we were able to tap into some technology at the time, and camera traps were in their infancy then, and we were able to tap.
Sorry, James. Are they ambush predators? Are they rattlesnakes?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of snakes are. All the vipers are. So basically, you've got to set a piece of kit up on a snake, and we used infrared sensors that would then trip and set the camera off. But actually, it wasn't the snake that was setting the camera off. It was the mammal coming along. And what we're pretty sure was going on was the snakes used their. I mean, it's actually interesting because a rattlesnake versus a mouse should be an even fight. Mouse, warm-blooded animal, mega fast twitch, everything, super senses. You don't catch a mouse easily. And for a rattlesnake to catch a mouse, it's a cold-blooded animal that doesn't move fast. When it does, it's in short bursts. But it's got this super sensitive tongue that it can find out where the mouse had been running, and it can then lie in wait. It's probably smelling the urine trails, the scent trails that mammals leave. So it's using the mammals. It is an arms race, really. It's like battle tactics. It's then laying wait, and the snakes don't give off much of a scent, so that the mouse won't know it's there. Then it's using its heat-sensitive pits to time a strike that, 99.9% of the time snakes move very, very slowly, but they have this super fast strike that is quicker than a mouse can operate under. And then they deliver venom, of course, which is sort of the ultimate natural weapon. And we saw that happening. And actually, what I think there's more to it than has even been described. I'm fairly sure that the venom is making the mouse evacuate its bowels, so that when it leaps off, it gives 2 or 3 final spasmodic leaps to go and die. The snake can then follow that trail. So it's incredible. It's like the special forces sort of version of the animal world. So I was very proud of that with Mark McEwen and Luke Barnett, and that would have been impossible without. We always stand on the shoulders of giants, and we stood on the shoulders of a scientific giant called Harry Green, who sort of pioneered radio telemetry of the American reptiles. So I was very proud of that, and great to meet him and use his work to help us.
Does it ever get hard I guess if you're more of a reptile fan, you might not give such a shit about the mouse, but does it ever get hard watching these animals be predated? If you're, say, like the rattlesnake's getting it, or are you kind of like circle of life?
I'm in the latter category. I don't, as long as I've not seen cruelty in the animal world very often. Usually stuff. No. I mean, it would be hard for me to kill a mouse quicker than a rattlesnake can. For that rattlesnake to survive, a mouse has to die. That's it. I'm going to die someday. If I die as quickly as that mouse died when the rattlesnake hit it, that wouldn't be a bad way to go.
No.
So no, I'm not. I'm not. Yeah, I'm much more circle of life stuff. I mean, you do see bad things occasionally. The Masai Mara, if you're squeamish, the Masai Mara is not a good place to go.
No, we had Hugh Miles on the podcast, and I was talking to him about some of the stuff he's done, and he was saying like some of the lions and stuff, it can get a bit gory.
Oh, it's horrific. I was on a project recently with 2 great guys, Sam Stewart and Simon King.
Yeah, and I know Sam. I went to uni with him.
You know Sam, yeah. So we were filming in the Serengeti. and the famous river crossings and people, presumably they sign up to a safari because they think it's like the Lion King, and people are lined up on the side of the river in their trucks, and the wildebeest come across, thousands of them, and you see these crocodiles that are like dinosaurs. Is that your dog?
That's my dog chiming in now. Sorry, because I was really engrossed. Pepper, shush.
Yes, shush, Pepper. Come on. I'm telling a fascinating anecdote. Yeah, so huge crocodiles smash a few of these wildebeest, and many more die. We had big waters flooding down the Mara River that year, so many more got swept away. They break their so these people are sat in their cars, and they have posh drinks, and breakfast is being laid out, and there's wildebeest coming up that riverbank with broken legs, and then they all run off. So the guides set out tables with flambéed breakfast and eggs and bottles of champagne, and then you hear this second stampede, and you wonder what that is, and it's all the baby wildebeest coming back to the river to look for their mummies. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
So you've paid for this, ridiculously expensive holiday, and no one told you about, you're about to see nature properly red in tooth and claw. I find that, that's obviously not particularly nice, but it is what happens. And I actually think I eat meat. I don't eat a lot of it. I've tried to get better at it, but I've never hidden away from what is involved in death and predation of the natural world. No. Mostly it's over pretty quickly. Certainly anything that gets hit by a Nile crocodile it's over pretty quickly.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm actually more interested in reptiles than fish. Weird, I don't really get much chance to talk about reptiles. Are my big thing, and I'd love to see the crocs doing that. That'd just be incredible, wouldn't it? Just because some of them are pretty big, aren't they? Some of these Nile crocodiles just smashing.
Yeah. Simon King used to categorize them, if he's seen it probably as much as anyone on earth, I would imagine. He was telling me that you've got different sizes of crocs. You've got crocs that are small and get out of the way. You've got crocs that are big enough to have half a go, but they're not really going to take down a wildebeest. They might get some scraps, but they'll also they would get damaged if the wildebeest go over the top of them. So they sit around at the edges. Would they be the adolescent equivalent? I suppose they would. And then you've got the big crocs, and these big crocs are big enough to pull down a wildebeest, and you'll see them. They'll come in from the side, and it's this bow wave, and you'll see the nose come up, and the wildebeest will disappear. And then there's a fourth category of crocodile that's so big, like these Grumeti dinosaurs, and they sit right in the front of 800 wildebeest. And the first 100 will come straight over the top of them, and they do not even care. And they'll just come up, open their mouth. And they're not actually, it may not be that spectacular because it's over in a second. Like big enough to eat half a zebra in one bite type.
Wow.
Big. Yeah. And they are, I don't know how old they are, 40 years plus, who knows?
Have you ever heard about the Nile crocodile called Gustav? We're going off on a tangent now, but there's a Nile crocodile. I don't know if it's still going. There was a Nat Geo documentary on it years ago, and I can't remember whereabouts in Africa it was, but there was a Nile crocodile, and the locals named it Gustav, and it had a parrot. How true this is and how you count it up. It had over 300 human kills attributed to it. Just over the years, it had gotten fishermen and whatever in there, and it was a beast of a crocodile. And it was a French film crew that went to go find it. And I don't think they never caught it, but they filmed it, and it was riddled with bullet holes in the back of it because these things are hide so tough. But it was enormous, this huge Nile crocodile. Whether it had personally killed 300, but it was certainly a man-eater. It was huge, absolutely enormous Nile crocodile that had a go at it.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
There'll be more info online somewhere. Maybe that's a podcast for another day. But yeah, Gustav the Nile crocodile. It was an absolute monster.
I worked on a project called Big Cat Diary back in the day, and we had a sort of blowout party. And in the middle of the party, one of the cameramen went down to the river and was, 5 meters away from the water. And he'd had a few drinks, and he picked up a bread roll and he threw it into the water, saying, "It's safe in there. There's no crocodiles." And as the bread roll hit the water, there was an explosion, and he beat a hasty retreat back a safe distance to the bar. But yeah, I think you would. I mean, swimming across the Mara rivers. One thing they never did in what was that show where people hurt themselves and staple gunned their hands to
Jackass.
Yeah. You'd never see anyone doing that on Jackass, I can tell you, because it would be a short swim. Yeah. You went across the wrong bit of the Mara River. Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
You'd get munched, wouldn't you? And obviously that was Attenborough working on that series as the narrator. What was it like working with him?
Oh, he's exactly like you expect. He's like your favorite uncle. He loves telling stories. He loves, the best times with him were after filming had finished, and he's got a glass of red wine, and he's a storyteller, and that doesn't end when the camera stops rolling. He'll tell you stories, and they're all the same kinds of stories that I've grown up listening to in rugby clubs. And my father's a great storyteller, and rugby clubs got a big storytelling tradition. But David's stories always involve, the King of Tonga, and
it's just another level.
Yeah. His stories are amazing. He's a great guy, and I'm just trying to think of it as an Attenborough story I could tell you that's broadcastable and appropriate. I mean, he also, I mean, one of the most special times I had with him was we had a day off, and we were in Adelaide, and we went to the Adelaide Museum, which has, I think, one of the best collections of Polynesian art. And it was myself and David and the production coordinator, Jenny Colley. And David is one of the world's recognized academic experts on Polynesian artifacts. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
He's got a show about a statue that was on possibly one of Captain Cook's ships that came from Easter Island, carved on wood that now no longer exists. That's the kind of thing he's collected all his life. And he's quite away from his TV job. He's an expert on that. And he took us around that museum. I mean, just what a pleasure. And he had a story about everything, absolutely everything. And he's charming, and everyone knows him, so that's tricky. But he gets misidentified as well. He gets called Richard all the time, which he never. Yeah. We were in an Australian supermarket, and someone came up to him and said, "I loved you in Gandhi." He said, "Well, that wasn't me. It was my brother, and he's not in it. He directed it. But other than that, you got it bang on." I've been in a bar with him. We stayed in this bar on the outskirts of Brisbane, and we went into we had a meal, and next door there was a fairly rowdy bar showing the Australia versus New Zealand rugby league game. David loves rugby.
Okay.
We used to bore each other about rugby. He played rugby when he was in the Navy. So we went to watch this rugby league game, and at half time, you can imagine what a bar on the outskirts of Brisbane that's showing Australia versus New Zealand at rugby league's like. It's it's fairly some fairly colourful language, a lot of beer being drunk. And we sat at the back and watched this good game. And at half time, they had an advert, and the advert, someone was mimicking David Attenborough. And one by one, everyone turned around in this bar and realized it was him. So a lot of kind of bizarre. And the other thing that happens with him is when you're with him, stuff happens. So we were in Perth, and we got invited to have drinks with Al Gore because he was in Perth. And his people found out that David was there, and one thing leads to another, and you're sat on a table with Al Gore, thinking, "This wouldn't happen to me if I wasn't with David Attenborough."
Yeah, so, just weird circumstance after weird circumstance. But no, that sounds fantastic. But before we go, I'll ask one more. So, seeing all the natural spectacles across the globe, has it changed or influenced you as a person in any way? Because obviously, it's quite a unique job that you get to see all these amazing places and these amazing wildlife spectacles. Has any of that changed you as an individual?
Hugely. I just think I'm phenomenally lucky. I still get massive imposter syndrome, and I'm 47. I've been doing it a long time. Excuse me, dog's barking. My dog this time. This is
Yeah.
Lola.
We'll take turns.
Yeah.
Turns.
Go out. Hold on. Lola, I'm talking about my life story here. Goodness. Eat it as well.
One of these days, you'll be able to tell a story without a dog barking halfway through.
Or an animal interrupting it. Yeah. No, it has changed me. I think I've met. It's mostly about people, though. I think I started out thinking wildlife spectacles were amazing, and that has not changed, and it's not diminished one little bit. And I could go back if you said to me you'd see some of the things you saw at the start of your career, I'd be no less wowed by them. So that my attitude and excitement about animals hasn't changed at all, actually, at all. The scientific understanding and the changing world has, but I think actually it's more about people, in that I've seen how much you can achieve with passion and drive. I think I used to think it was all about ability or intelligence or talent, whatever that means. And most of the people I've seen who operate at the highest level, who they have picked something they enjoy or they're passionate about, and they've just not taken no for an answer. And that's, I wish I could impart that to my younger self. I take my time. I mean, I've always been up for to me, enjoyment's more important. The process is more important than the end. And I think I was sort of that way when I started out. I'm more that way now, definitely. There's just no point agonizing over things you can't control and worrying about, if your film's going to win awards or everyone loves it or what does everyone think of it. By far now, my priority's enjoying the process, loving the process. And if you're lucky, that'll make a great show, I think. I could talk about, the changes that the planet's going through, not all bad, actually. And I could tell you, I can't actually, because it is on a top secret a secret program I'm working on at the moment. We've been fortunate enough to film something that didn't used to happen 100 years ago because people have stopped abusing the natural world. So there are stories of great reasons to give hope. But I think the one thing that's changed my attitude is just the people I've met who are extraordinarily passionate and often about quite small little areas of life. It might be someone that's studying, a single little snail or a fish in a river or an anemone on a coral reef, and those things are really important. And actually, it's really cool, and I've been very privileged to meet them and see what they do.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's a really interesting point that you make about just doing your own thing, I guess, and not worrying too much about the award side of things or anything like that. I mean, I used to worry about every little thing, and now I'm quite happy with how my work turns out. Like, it's not necessarily the best in the world, but it works and it pays the bills. And that's my main priorities in life are: do I like what I'm doing? Is it paying the bills? And as long as it hits those two, that's all I'm really concerned about. And it does do that. So I'm a lot more chilled out with what I do than I used to. I used to worry about, oh, am I doing the right thing? And now I just sort of, again, another river pun, we'll get a few in, but I go with the flow, so to speak. And it's
go with the flow.
Yeah.
Do you have a sort of stock load of freshwater puns? I bet you do.
I've heard them all. I've absolutely, I have a bream and stop carping on, or there's loads. I should do a book really on it, just bad fish puns for dads or something.
Bad fish puns. So whenever you go anywhere, if you're with the right, as I've said, I like to enjoy myself on shoots, and I always try and go away with people with a sense of humor. And one of the games is, whatever animal you're filming is get as many silly jokes regarding that animal as possible. It never gets tired, funnily enough.
Or they're too polite to say anything, James.
Oh yeah, it could be that. Yeah.
I've ruined every shoot for you now. Oh, they're all just being really nice.
I thought they liked me. It's just because I'm in charge, and they're just being polite.
Well, I mean, it's
great joke, boss.
It's just an option, might not necessarily. You could be really funny.
I may be a bit funny. I doubt it though.
Look, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, and I'll see you around. Cheers.
No problem, Jack. Take care. Good to speak to you.
Bye.